Hey, it's Friday again, Tim, and then we're back in studio here to talk about. I think we're going to talk about empowering our teams and delegation and all of that wonderful stuff, right?
Yes, yes, indeed. It's funny because I've been talking just about this topic to two classes this week, and it's a very timely discussion. I think I have some questions that are going to be challenging both you and me.
Well, that's good. I like to be challenged. Maybe not on a Friday afternoon so much, but I like to be challenged. But so when I saw this topic, when I thought about how we might present this topic, I thought back to my early days as a starting off. Well, first of all, as a team lead, and then graduating up into the project management ranks. And I'm thinking, I'm now commiserating perhaps with our audience of young project managers who perhaps have an issue with delegation as I did. And when I say issue, I mean a severe issue. Because you see, Tim, in my experience, as an IT systems analyst coming forward into a team leader position and then project manager, no one could do the tasks as well as I could.
Mhm.
And as a result of that, delegation was something that I struggled with. I did not want to delegate certain tasks. And here's what happened to me. I ended up working evenings, nights, all nighters, sometimes weekends. But you know what? It was done well. What I didn't understand was how much I was hurting myself and how much I was hurting my own career.
Yeah, yeah, and not only that, um, just the constant state of emotional urgency you put on yourself, and you're looking over the shoulders of other people and say, "Just get out of the way."
Yeah.
And it's it's not making the project better. That's the weird thing.
But I think there's something else. When I thought back, even when I was a programmer, developer, I think for us in IT, we have this martyr complex. Don't we love to get around a beer on a Friday evening and say, "Yeah, I put in 75 hours this week. Still got another weekend to work."
Yeah, I swam an extra 50 yards this week. I ran an extra 2 miles this week, and I worked an extra 5 hours. Oh, congratulations. We're
Yeah,
measuring our success by units of effort instead of results.
exactly. And I wonder how much of my life I could have had back had I just delegated.
Well, and yeah, we'll talk about the more finer details, but why do that? That's not really the job of a project manager.
Right.
So and that gets me to the first question. Okay. When we say delegation, we say empowerment, we're actually getting people to do certain tasks so that we can free up our time to do other things. Now that gives me a big question. Um, what are you willing to delegate and what are you not willing to delegate? And how do you make those decisions?
Well, I think there's a couple. First of all, I like the fact that you said empowerment when you superimpose the word empowerment over the word delegation, and I think we forget that as project managers. When we delegate, we're not just getting rid of the scut work that's on our desks that we don't want to do or that we want to parcel out. We actually want to judiciously delegate in such a way that we are empowering our teams and individuals on our teams to be able to do a better job. And so I think there's many things that we like to that we should be delegating. For instance, let me give you a few, and then I want to hear a couple from you. Repetitive tasks, things like reviewing the budget every week or going through the time management process and how we're doing against plan, variance analysis. I think we can easily delegate that to the person we're mentoring to become the next team leader, the next project manager behind us. Something like a lot of time consuming work. If I can give meaningful work to one of my team members, getting it off of my desk, something that is consuming my time, it gives me more time, as you suggested, to strategize and to think kind of more big picture items. But I've got a few more, but I want to hear from you as well.
That's exactly right. And if you think about it logically, if you're taking your research and analysis and giving it to somebody, you're giving it to the people who know more than you do. And if you're giving scheduling activities and you're giving scoping activities, you're giving it to the team members and they better know this stuff better than you. And that's the key. Delegate and empowering means, I'm handing over my power. I'm giving it to somebody else who knows better than me. And how can you get better results out of that?
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I keyed in a couple of things you said there. One was having the person who has skills probably better than yours. I remember I loved doing Microsoft project planning. I love to do the Gantt charts, the resource scheduling, all that stuff. Until I found out I had a couple of team members on my teams that were excellent people. And I reluctantly gave away what I love to do to them because they could do it 5 times faster and give me results much quicker. So, from that perspective, I delegated something that they had better skills to do than I did.
Yeah. This whole aspect of leadership and management is an ego reset. I enjoy so many different things, and I have to remember that it may not be a feature aspect or component of this project, and I have to check myself. When I start getting really attached or emotionally involved, this is, there's a huge risk in doing that without knowing it. If you wax poetic about a certain aspect because you just enjoy it, um, you know, is it really appropriate for that project?
Yeah. And then also getting back to the empowerment part of delegation, if I've got team members, and I always do have team members who are up and comers, why wouldn't I give them something, whether I like to do it or not, something that would boost their skills? Because if I can boost their skills while freeing up my time, I'm killing two birds with one stone. I'm freeing up my time, but I'm giving them something that they can strive to do to better their career.
And in the first 2 to 5 years of our management experience, it's all about, the more I control, the more successful I am. The more I manage, the more successful I am. And as you progress in your career, you realize it's not that control that actually gives you your influence. It's the relationships you develop. It's the ability to connect with people that actually allow you to influence and motivate. And that's how you move the big obstacles down the road on your project. Sure, you can control and you can manipulate and you can influence, but those are small steps. And we need to do that. But when you get to the motivation and influence, the big picture items, you're going to have to be able to focus on there and be able to do that through other people. You don't take their work away. You have to figure out how to help them do the work better.
Yeah. And part of motivation, by the way, is also giving them some fun tasks.
Mhm.
Because besides my regular work, if you give me some fun things to do, yeah, it might cost me an extra couple hours a week to do them, but they're fun and they motivate me because I want to come back for more.
Exactly, exactly. And the risk is, you're empowering them. You're giving them some of your power. And we have to overcome one misconception about power and influence. Power is not finite. It's not like you have a bucket of power and when you delegate, there goes some of your power. We have to reset our minds on that. Again, one of my mentors in my last corporation said, "Tim, delegate, delegate. You're going to have to because you're going to have to be doing bigger and better and more strategic things." And he said something. He said, "When you help people grow, they don't push you out. The people who move up push you up." And I did not know this. It took me 5 to 7, maybe even 9 years to experience this, not just learn it as a book exercise or as a theory, but actually experience this before I trusted his advice.
Well, and if you think about what you just said or what he said to you, when you give away some of your power, you're actually releasing yourself to increase your power.
That's right.
And I actually don't like the word power, but basically the influence or your ability to strategize or manage a project.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We're saying exactly the same thing.
Well, you asked me the second part of that question is what don't you delegate? And I think we owe it to our audience to answer that as well, because a couple of things in my mind. First of all, if it takes me a lot longer to explain it to someone than just to do it myself, like if it takes me 3 hours to explain a 30-minute task, I'll probably not delegate. I'll probably just do it and look for other opportunities to educate or pass on that delegation in a kind of more controlled fashion at a later time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a big part. The other part is, was this a precise assignment from someone who said, "Tim, you're going to do this. I need you to do this." Of course, you don't delegate that. The other part is, what's your job title inside the company? If your title is to do this and not do that, then you're going to follow that too, because we all utilize business requirement and organizational preference in our projects. It only makes sense.
Well, and the other thing is, as project manager, you often deal with sensitive or confidential information. Those kinds of things you just don't delegate. I mean,
Right.
I'm not going to get you if you're working for me, Tim, and I need to write a review on Carol's performance. I'm not going to delegate that to you so that I can sign it off because that's not your job, and it's sensitive and it's confidential, and it's part of what is my responsibility, not yours. So,
And
sure.
and yeah, yeah, exactly. And on the flip side of that coin, I've actually done this, and I made a rule of this, that if one of my team members has confidential information, I'll evaluate whether the project requires for me to see that information or not.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm responsible for that confidential information. I'm responsible for that confidential information making an impact on the project. And so whether I know it or not, this is not, something that bolsters my self-respect or gives me pride. It's something, is it functional and does it have value for the project? And that's where it starts and ends.
Yeah. And I'm just going to throw out one more. We should probably get on to another topic, but the other one is, just like to motivate, you want to give them some fun tasks. You don't want to also just delegate them the boring tasks. Sometimes you, as the project manager or team lead, you have to deal with the boring tasks and do them yourself. Because if you're always sloughing them off on someone else, you'll get a reputation.
That's exactly right. Now, let's talk about something. The literature that I use and historical literature says you want to look at what people in teams are really good at and get them to work in that area. Now, what's the reasoning behind that? Shouldn't we give it to someone that, we want them to learn something? Or is it just that you want to delegate and make sure that you don't have to think about it?
I think there's some of both. For example, when I build a team, I build the team for their strengths. I don't build a team necessarily to use as an educational process for my team members. Not that I don't use the time to educate people who are on my team, but at the same time, if I want to build a very solid technical team, I want to get the best database architect that I can get, not 3 database analysts that I'm going to train to become architects. So I think there's that process. But and by the way, in the second part of what you said, yes, there are some very strong advantages on these typed projects that we run, is to be able to delegate to someone who you know is going to do the job so that you can forget about it and go on to something else.
And there's an aspect to that too. If they're strong at something, they're probably going to do it on their off time.
Yeah.
They're probably going to be thinking about it while they're having their meals or talking to other people about it, um, even if they're not paid. So these people know this work. And not only that, but they have a level of pride, of ownership and accountability and responsibility that you won't find with people who are just assigned work that's just work to get done.
Well, and I also read a statistic recently that teams that focus on strengths are 12.5, 12.5% greater productivity. They have, and if I can get an extra 10% productivity on a project, I'm swimming in fortune, let alone 12. And then the other statistic I read was that teams that have a feedback loop around their strengths end up with about a 9% greater profitability on projects. And if I can add 9% to my bottom line because I focused on strengths and fed back to those people of strength, then I'm doing something right. So yeah, I like to build my teams around strengths.
Yeah, yeah, and at the same time, again, we don't have to say this, but there's always the weaknesses too, because
Yeah.
no matter how strong people are, it's our job to make sure that we protect them from the things that might take them down. And I've had this where I've changed schedules or I've helped people, modify their work times, or I've swap people out just because, I knew that they were going through certain things and they needed the time to actually process stuff outside of work while they were getting this work done.
Well, and if I can work with a team based on strengths, that is, I'm valuing individuals for the signature strength they bring. I can also count on them to compensate for each other's, you call it weaknesses, I might call it shortcomings, but they can compensate for each other's shortcomings. And in doing so, I think you build even more strength into the team.
This is what fascinates me. This is the finesse of leadership. When you start realizing that you're not the only leader in the project, delegating things to the team, like you have a remote worker, and making sure when you're talking, when you're in kickoff and when you're working on the team charter, you're saying, hey, these guys are out in Malaysia. They're going to be isolated from the greater body of the work. Let's make sure we all have an effort. And then following up throughout the project and saying, did you hear from this person? What was the last content you got from them? And that way you can tell, number one, you have the project moving forward. Number two, you have everybody engaged and, they're actually contributing to the work of the team.
Yeah. And you can also allocate or delegate. Now, delegation is kind of the part of what we're talking about, but you can allocate roles also based on strengths of individuals. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a skills based strength. I'm thinking of a time in my recent career where I was on a project and I was advising um, the system test team on terms of developing the test cases and all that sort of thing. Well, as we were passing off the software, this was a predictive model. We're passing off the software to the user base so that they could do their user acceptance test. There was great difficulty with the leader of the user acceptance test team. And our team discovered that I had actually developed a fairly good relationship with that person. So they devised this plan where they, quote, lent me to the user acceptance team an advisory role. And therefore, I was able to help this leader who would not get along with anybody else in our team, was able to help him structure the team and get the user acceptance test done. So in that case, my strength was the relationship, not necessarily the skill, but because of that, I was able to work in that situation and end up with a productive responsibility on the user acceptance side.
Right, exactly. Strengths in attributes and character. There's also strengths in knowledge. I had this wonderful team member. He was like a computer database, and I could ask him anything. And he would come up at the strangest times and say, there's this article. And I'm going, where do you get these things? And it was just fascinating to watch him. And so giving him that role as the architect of knowledge and information acquisition for a project, even though it was informal, it was wonderful experience as well as a great learning experience for me.
Well, and I think also strength gets built in that informality. Yes, you have to have structure and formality, but you also have to have flexibility. And as a result of that, in your example, you were able to build an extra strength into your team because you were allowed to have flexibility.
Right, right, right. And 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 again, getting back and closing this out, we also delegate to people who are not strong in certain areas. It's not that we're trying to force them to learn or train them to take over something or responsible. It just is they are the most appropriate person for them. Yeah, they might not be good at skills, but maybe they have a strength of character or they have a strength of knowledge that actually makes them the perfect fit for that role.
Yeah. So when we delegate, I know where we're going with this. When we actually do the delegation, is it always finding someone strong to take on the task to give others more time, or can we also delegate to people who are not so strong in certain areas? What do you think?
It's balance. And again, when we talk about strong, let's open up the playing field for strong. You know, janitors with their strength are can be often great team members. The admins are incredible. I remember on one data center project, there were 7 of us who were helping the CIO uh, gain acceptance of the project, basically get approval for the project charter. And we were working for 2 weeks with this one admin. She wasn't the CIO's admin, but the CIO knew of her and said, "This is the person you want to work with." And actually, the relationship and the output of our results was such that she became formally assigned to the project team, which was unheard of in that corporation. And it was amazing. She just her unique approach to relationships and understanding culture and the politics of the corporation made things work so well.
Well, and that's so true. And I guess I've looked at this. In fact, I've had experience in this aspect. And that is, especially if tasks are on the critical path, and so they are not so time sensitive, that you do have time to delegate them to someone who is less accomplished in that area, but gives them a learning process, a learning opportunity in a task that otherwise they might not get a chance to if it was kind of one of those crashed schedules where you had to get it done. So
Yeah.
there's always those opportunities to make those things happen.
And think about it this way too. Okay, let's take out um, a leadership model. This is called situational leadership. And you look at the aspects of people to characterize how you're going to lead them. Basically, how you're going to engage them as either their supervisor or manager. And situational leadership says, okay, you don't just look at their experience, you look at their confidence too. And experience is great, but confidence is not. And by adjusting your leadership style, you can focus on helping them develop their confidence and allow themselves to demonstrate their experience, not just to other people, but to themselves. So again, you don't have time for these teachable moments on projects, but when you do, or if you take advantage and make time for them, this is where neat things can happen. And it's great for the project and it's great for the people who experience it.
Yeah, there's confidence. You can also tell by their enthusiasm. You can also tell by a requested need. I remember very specifically having a person on my team who wanted to improve her, English was her second language. So she wanted to improve her presentation and writing skills. And so besides her normal project tasks, I was able to delegate the status reporting to her. Now, she didn't just suddenly begin to pick up the status report and present it to our client, but she did pick it up, did the basic process, bring it back to myself for, kind of a review and assistance in terms of where she needed to reword something. But over 5 or 6 or 10 iterations, she became quite good. Now, was that her job? No. But her request of me to improve her English skills, we were able to use that situation to do exactly that.
I have another question for you.
All right.
So we have assessment, right? We look at analysis and we look at all those. Number one, do you go back and analyze people's capability? And number two, do you find yourself measuring people when you or people's performance, I should say, when you do delegate? And how do you do that? And what do you look for? I know you mentioned a few metrics just a couple minutes ago.
Yeah, I tell you, if you asked me if I do that actively, I would say no. That's probably a failure on my part as a project manager because typically when you assign something, you should put some measurable characteristic or measurable aspects around that delegation so that you can, in fact, look at it later on quantitatively as well as qualitatively. I've kind of relied a lot on my gut,
Mhm.
which, you may say that's good or that's not good. But after all these years of working with people, a lot of times my gut will tell me qualitatively if the task that I gave them was handled properly. And I shouldn't say task, the delegation could be multiple tasks that I gave them was in fact dealt with from a not a perfection standard, but from just a very good standard that was useful on my project.
Yeah. For me, I created a simple set of indicators, metrics that I use project wide. Because all of my projects were from 10 to $30 million down to 4 weeks, and all the costs were indirect. And so I had to create a set of indicators that would work on everything, right? And so I broke it down very fundamentally. I said, okay, for each and every project, I need to know the progress of the project, the work, some type of indicators. That could be earned value, it could be a dashboard, it could be a schedule, whatever it is. I need that indicator for the work moving forward. Number two, I need a set of indicators around the team. What's the health of the team? Is the team progressing in its ability to work together? Is the team, not the individuals, getting the work done? And then at the third level down, or the third level of decomposition, I'm looking at the individuals. I'm looking at the engagement of the individuals. How often am I hearing them? How often am I seeing them? How often am I seeing their influence? And then what are their contributions? So you have the engagement of the individuals and the work contributions that they're providing. And this works for all projects, and it works whether the people are in the office or remotely. I had such a broad range of projects that I couldn't just use a template. I had to use a model like that.
Oh, that makes sense. In fact, you just reminded me that I've been in situations where suddenly someone went dark. And when I say, I mean, they kind of went quiet. And you're right. You kind of say, I haven't heard from Tom for a while. Wonder what's going on. Could be a personal problem, could be whatever. But usually, if someone goes quiet, it's also affecting their ability to be productive on the project.
Yeah.
So, and there have to be kind of those signals, those almost intuitive signals that as you're checking in on your team, you're picking up on those kinds of ideas so that you don't end up losing momentum because you missed out on this one person's going quiet.
So I heard your gut earlier, and I heard signals just now. I call that muscle memory.
Yeah.
With the formal term of that, it actually is tacit knowledge. You do it, and it's been such a part of who you are, it becomes a habit, and you don't even remember how the habit was developed or what the steps of that habits are. So this is funny about the exam itself. This is a side discussion, right? But um, a lot of people going through the exam, and the few people who don't pass the first time, um, they say that I should have listened to my intuition. They guess the answer the first time. And if people are diligent in preparation for like 4 to 8 weeks, and if they're going through about half an hour to an hour a day of work, learning to trust that little voice inside you is not, listening to something that's just, flippant, giving you an emotional response. It can very easily be something that has been a habitual practice, just so natural a part of you.
And that's interesting. And again, from my personal experience, I remember when I applied for my MBA, I'd been in industry for a while and decided to go back to school and get my MBA. And I had what is it the MCAT that you I'm trying to think what the exam is that you do here in the US. You have to do the MCAT, which is a series of questions there's on different aspects of management. And I did very well on it. I mean, I did okay, but where I shined or where I got in the 99th percentile were on the written essay questions. Because as you were saying, I went with my gut. They presented a situation and basically put us as managers into that situation, how we would handle it. And there may have been a textbook answer, I don't know. But for whatever reason, when I went with my gut, the person who graded the answer decided that my gut was right.
Yeah, yeah, and again, you have to be a little critical. You have to be, testing for bias, but at the same point, there's a lot of reason to listen at least to that little voice inside and give it a voice before you discredit it.
Yeah. Did you have any role models? Kind of, I know you mentioned a couple managers already, but did you have any good role models um, that you used, for example, as you grew in your career? And by the way, how did you find those people?
Well, it's funny. It was most of my mentors I found through synchronicity. Um, One of my mentors was 45, 47 when I was 25, easily 20 years old, and he'd been working in the same corporation for almost 30 or 40 years. And he actually was so natural in the way he led. And his delegation was just like, go for it. Don't ask questions. Just do it. Just try it out. And let's talk through the issues that you're working on. He was always like, the experience and the knowledge that you get through doing the work is almost more important. And he knew that he could back me up in that, and that's what gave him the confidence to put me in my position. He could actually get me out of any trouble I created. And so pushing me in actually not only set me up to be confident with the work and the learning, but it also taught me, to not be afraid to take on new work later on in my career.
Very good. I had, when I left school, when I got my computer science degree and got my first actual paying position, I ended up working for a woman manager, she's probably 15 years my senior. She had such a calming demeanor about her. And just in her matter of fact way of going about her day and helping us kind of understand what our focus was, what our priority was, and helping us also through the tough challenges of the project and working with us. She just, I think at that point, in my early career as an observer of a project manager, just gave me a great role model to say, If you can stay calm and cool and level headed and just kind of approach it very matter of factly, there's a way to develop projects and execute projects that is productive without stressing everybody out.
Yeah, yeah, and again, it doesn't require you to do something that's not part of your character, and that's a beautiful thing. And that's what this guy and one of his friends, who was a peer of mine actually, was the same. He had the same character where he said, "Tim, you're working hard. Don't work hard. It's not hard work that gets you results. It's like being a surfer, you know? Managing and leading is like being a surfer. You use the waves and the energy. If you use your energy, it's gonna drain you. But the work itself, the waves when you're surfing actually carry you. And if you learn that, that's a powerful tool. And that's a lot of delegation. It's keeping the work moving forward. It's keeping the progress going forward. And so it's no longer effort work. It's basically, keeping things from stopping the work.
Yeah, do remember another situation, probably my favorite role model situation, and I think I've talked about this person before on previous podcasts. But our company had won a fairly good sized project, and I was thrust into my very first project management role from being a senior team lead on other projects, responsible to the project manager.
Uh-huh.
And it was not only a challenging project, but it was in a cultural area that I was not familiar with. So, challenge project, challenge culture. And I think in my mind, I had two options. I could stubbornly say, I can do this. Or what I did do, this is also for our young men and women who are listening to us right now, budding project managers. What I did do is I picked up the phone and called my vice president and said, I need help. I want to do this, but I need help. Is there someone that you can bring out here to help mentor me in a way that after some time they can leave and I can pick things up, but I do need help. And that person, he couldn't have found a better person to bring, because not only did he show me how to manage a project and manage a cultural situation, but he also delegated to me those tasks that allowed me to grow quickly. And every day at 5 o'clock, when my client went home, we sat down in his office for an hour and went over the events of the days. He coached me where I could have improved. He applauded me where I did well. That was probably my best role model mentorship position that I could ever ask for.
That's wonderful. And again, that's what we're looking for. Now, let's switch gears on this. Um, How do you actually look for the people that's appropriate to delegate? I know we're talking about strengths and we're talking about, opportunities for growth in that. But how do you know that we're delegating in an appropriate way? And what risks do we have when we're delegating? What do we have to concern ourselves with? I know that's complicated, but let's dig into that.
That's a multi-part question.
Exactly.
We'll take
Exactly.
Yeah, the first part, when you said, as how do you know that the person is ready? We talked about it a little earlier, and that is the whole idea of confidence. When I can see a person confidently approaching their own tasks and almost doing it through their own muscle memory so that I can tell that they're ready for the next step up. Or I think I mentioned enthusiasm. If they're enthusiastic towards learning something new, or if they ask to learn something new, then having worked with that person over some time, I can begin to understand whether or not they're ready. I think that's the best way that I can describe that.
Yeah. Yeah. They're what they're focused on, what their efforts are, the quality of the work they're providing right now, and all of that. That's fine. And all of those contribute to, okay, this person's ready for a little bit more. And you're right. There are some people in the work environment that say, Tim, I want to learn this. Okay.
Now, if you want to get technical, you've seen these 4x4 grids.
Right.
So if I put confidence along one axis and experience along the other, and I sort of go low confidence, low experience, low confidence, high experience, low experience, high confidence, high confidence, if I look at those and I can place the person somewhere in that grid, that may also help me understand when it's time to be able to elevate them to the next position by delegating something more challenging to them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Okay. Now there are risks in
Yeah,
delegation.
definitely.
And how do we protect that, especially as we're first learning how to delegate? What do we look for, and how do we protect the project from our early attempts to delegate turn out poorly?
So thinking about this, and if I were in my audience right now listening to you and me, I'd be thinking risks in terms of the person I delegate to. But I think the risk is more with me as the neophyte delegator. And here's why I'm saying this. Remember my opening gambit where I talked about the fact that I never wanted to delegate because I could do it better? Well, let's say I am required and requested by my boss to delegate. One of the risks then upon me becomes I start to second guess. Should I have delegated that? Should I perhaps given it to someone else? Or worse yet, micromanaging that person after I delegate the task to them. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Overdel. Yeah. Yeah. It's not just giving them the work, but it's understanding that you have to have the appropriate monitor and control on top of it. And that has to be, designed for each individual and also for each type of work.
Well, and I keep going on this same theme. And I think it's the problem. The risk is more with the delegator than the delegatee. I remember having a boss who would delegate to me, and then when I would complete the task or was partway through it, basically the impression they gave me was, "Well, that's not how I would have done it." But what does that do to my confidence? There's more than one ways to accomplish a task. But
Yeah,
just because I didn't do it your way doesn't mean it's wrong.
yeah, and again, the results are, we have to remember when we delegate, we're still getting the work done. We're getting it done through other people. So
Yeah.
the risk of the delegation is basically our relationship with the other person. It's not their ability or inability to get the work done. So if something's getting in the way of the work, we misread the person.
Yeah.
We misread the work, and that's our problem. So yeah, the risk is on our shoulder as the delegator.
On the other hand, have you ever been pleasantly surprised? That person didn't do it the way I would have done it, but wow.
I've learned, oh
I
boy, you hear every teacher who's been in front of students for 3 years saying, my greatest teachers are the students. My greatest learning is keeping ahead of the most aggressive learners in my classes. And that's true, not just in a class, but on a project. That's another reason to delegate. It's finding, your experts and exposing, their they taught me a lot of tricks. The way I teach people how to prepare for the exam is not me. It's all about what my students came back who did it most successfully. And it's the same way with delegation. If you actually capture the lessons learned from how the people you delegated do the work, and if it's different and if it's better, you've won.
Well, and the theme that runs through this whole discussion we've had for these last 40, 45 minutes is project managers keep your egos in check because you're delegating. You want to be able to get it off your desk to free you up for a different, perhaps, a larger strategy type thing, which means if they end up performing better than you would have, rejoice in that. Don't sit there and go,
Yeah,
should
exactly. It's not the project manager's success. It's not the success that you actually did. It's the success that occurred under your watch. And there are a lot of factors there. And you have to be accountable for failure. Okay. You have to be. And that's just that's just part of the job of being a manager and leader. But at the same point, it's not your success either.
like, and that's the other part of this is when the praise comes down upon you, project manager, on for a task well done that you delegated, make sure that you say, I did not do that. This person takes all the credit. You need to be able to be accountable, but also give accolades where accolades are due.
Yeah, ethics. Because so much of our job is leadership, to actually talk about ethics and wrong or right ways of doing things and then act unethically, nobody's going to follow you or listen to you. That's you don't do that to other people around you who do one thing and say another. Why should you think that the people around you do anything otherwise?
But and exactly. Now, as I was thinking about our discussion today, I was thinking this is so basic, Jim. And if this is so basic, why do project managers, do managers not do these things? Why do they? I mean, if you think about this whole idea of bringing your staff up through delegation, through whatever roles you put them in, why is this so difficult? Why do we need to be reminded of this so often?
Here's the reason I think. Well, here's one of the things I think about, and I think about this all the time. And I ask my students, number one, when you're learning project management, how many of your role models are formally trained in management, in business, and in leadership? How many people were formally, and how many were just, it was thrust upon them and they just had to figure it out by themselves?
That's a
Now,
great. No, go ahead.
that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, how many people were formally trained in critical thinking and analysis? You even without a mentor, you can do a lot of experiments and progress, but we're not even taught, how to do this. Universities, right? Your undergraduate and your graduate program, they attempt to teach you this, but this is something that we should learn all the way through our education. Basically your synthesis and your analysis and your innovation and being able to defend your hypothesis. I we we think this is lofty and we think it's magic smoke and, oh, I can't do it. No, it's natural. It's normal. This is how humans take opinions and get closer to the truth. We forget this.
Well, and when you said about how many have been formally trained, I can honestly say that a couple of the corporations that I worked for, we formally trained our managers. I mean, some of these could have written early versions of the PMBOK easily because they were that good. But here's my caveat. They were that good at the process. What we're talking about here is not the process. The
Yeah.
process is the skill, the attributes of delegation and relationship are they were not formally trained in. And a lot of them failed at that.
Now, if you go back about 2000 years, they look at this leadership as a primary trainable characteristic. It's something that you have to live and grow. Um, in the 20th century, we transitioned from the earliest 20th century from no, there are born leaders and there are born not leaders. And then later on in the century, we learned it is a learnable skill. Yes, some people are good at it because they enjoy it and they get rewards from it, but everybody can learn better. And so it's been in the last 40 to 50 years that we've actually seen this as a formal discussion. in universities as well as in business training.
Well, and I might argue for my own observation, and my own observation after all these years is considerable. But I might argue that the born leaders that we call born leaders are really people who are born with that extra chromosome of charisma, which has less to do with leadership than just their likability factor.
Yeah. There's so many characteristics about human behavior that we're still learning, but we do understand that leadership itself and the finer aspects of leadership can be learned and practiced and refined.
Exactly. Yeah. Some of us take a little longer. And when we get it, we have fun.
And that's the beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're done for today.
I think we're done, Tim. This was good. Even though we regurgitated perhaps many of our hours and hours of on the job training in these last few minutes, and we reminded ourselves of what it is that it really takes to be a good leader in the delegation aspects of our job.
Yeah, and we still have lots of leadership to talk to before we get into the tasks of the actual technical management of projects. I'm looking forward to our future discussions. But if anybody out there has questions, we'll be willing to focus on those as well. So where to ask questions, where can we find you, Merv?
Well, I keep saying LinkedIn because, and I tell you what, I was on LinkedIn. One of my favorite guys, you can look him up, is Andy Kaufman. I was listening to one of his podcasts as a result of a LinkedIn article that kind of showed up on my desk. And I'm thinking, Andy's so wise in many ways. And I think you and I have good wisdom. I think people can seek us out on LinkedIn as well and get perhaps not a full podcast on LinkedIn, but they can certainly ask us questions and get some of the things that we talked about today answered for them as well.
Exactly. And I as well. I'm primarily at LinkedIn, and there are opportunities to reach out through YouTube as well. If you found us on YouTube, please join and ask for more information. We're here every week. We're exploring various aspects of project management. Right now, we're going through the exam content outline, and our interest is driven primarily by the interests of the students I teach, as well as the people who influence and are around projects that Mervs are in. So please ask.
We're much more fun than Gantt charts, status reports, and all of those technical things that we do. We like to do project management from a leadership perspective. So until next week, you will find us back here, same channel, same time.
Thanks again, Merv, and thanks everyone else.